Yeah. So, so I'll just throw out the first question on this. So I'm curious to know from you, what have you learned about your students by looking at your classroom through the C4 lens? I mean, because you're science, and so I'm super curious, being a completely different content than English, what you have learned through this project. And I would too. I was thinking about this as we were arranging to talk, because one of her questions on here is, I used to think, now I think. And so I'm even curious to hear from you, like, because you went to Harvard in 2019, right? And were you using like visual stuff before then?
Very little. I mean, I was just really just dabbling with it at that point.
So I'm even curious to hear for you, how has your journey been with, doing the summer workshop in 2019, right before COVID, and then to where you are now? Like, how has that evolved, and how have you, as a teacher, as a science, like an educator, but then as a science teacher, evolved from this? How's your perspective evolved?
Right. I think that I think that I always knew that I think I always knew that that kids were capable of a lot more than we ask of them and give them credit for in the classroom. Um, and I guess that maybe I just kind of remember from when I was a student and kind of feeling, times where, we could do more here, or um, or I guess kind of sitting through that just kind of traditional school day, with just lecture, practice, rinse, repeat. I just felt like there was a lot more to that, and I always kind of knew that in the back of my mind, and I always dabble with that. And I never thought I was very good at, um, kind of leading discussions. I just didn't really think I was very good at it, and I really felt like that once I learned, um, once I learned the tools from, from Harvard and from Project Zero, and then from C4 was just kind of an order of magnitude even above that. That it's almost like now I have this toolkit to, um, become more of a teacher as opposed to a science teacher. And now I'm kind of like a more of a teacher that happens to teach science. But I mean, I think what I'm really going after is the thinking that the kids, I mean, I talk to these kids, and they take their AP tests, and the vast majority of kids in my class that take the AP test, the reason that they take it is that they don't want to be a science major, and that they just want to check the box on their science credits before they go off to college and study. For most of them, it's business or finance or something. I mean, that's what the majority of kids, said it, or medical, that they want to go into. So they're really just trying to check the box. So, for me, I mean, I hope that they come out of this as thinkers. And I think that that's really what I've learned is from this, is that they are really capable of a lot. And the more you ask of them, the more they can continue to give you, provided that you establish the relationship with them. So I'll turn that back to you.
So I think, so I am in agreement with you wholeheartedly. And, I have definitely seen my perspective about the purpose of a classroom is different. And I have always thought, like you, going back to when I was in high school, I hated school. Like, I hated it. I hated high school. Or I hated the academic part because it was so freaking boring. And I was kind of a problem always, because I was bored in high school, and I was always kind of in trouble, especially my senior year, and out of boredom. And so if you're not going to entertain my brain, I'm going to entertain it for you, and I'm going to be a nuisance to the principal. And so I think about my classroom and I get frustrated sometimes because we're still on this very traditional schedule, like 45 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever it is. And so to kind of make it ebb and flow like I want to, I feel like it's kind of constricted, but right, what are the things that we can control? But and clearly the time is not one of those right now. And so how do we work within the limitations of what we have to make this time that we do have with them a space and an opportunity that is something unique as a thinking classroom that thinks about things beyond these walls, right? And that really brings in so that we can stop saying like, well, when you get to the real world, right, to bring the real world into the classroom. And I think one of the biggest things that I have noticed is like I was really getting somewhere before COVID, and I really felt I understood my students on a different level than I had before, having done like the summer with Harvard in 2018 and having done some other conferences and so forth. I felt like I was building towards this really cool thing, but I didn't know what I was building towards. And then COVID hit and blew that all up. And like last year, I feel like I was just surviving to get through hybrid and all that stuff. But then this year was like the worst teaching that I have ever done in the history of my teaching. Like I had some health problems, but then it just was bad. Like the kids were grouchy, like, and it was just disastrous. I shouldn't say disastrous, that's hyperbole, but it felt that way to me because I know what a great space the classroom can be, but I learned so much by having so many things not work. Because and I think one of the biggest things for me was when we got those 4 eyes and when we started to talk about influence. Mm-hmm. And that really struck me because I felt like the kids I had pre-pandemic really understood their influence and they had seen multiple different student groups protest because of gun violence, right? Pushing back against school shootings. And so they, and there were several things that happened. Oh gosh, what's her name? She spoke at, I believe, the UN about climate change.
Oh, the Greta, the young lady.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. They had seen her, they had seen the Parkland kids, they had seen, like, there were several instances of young people really doing a lot of things. And so I felt like kids really understood that they had an influence and that they, weren't just these young kids and that they could do things. But then when we came back with this year, that all, like at the beginning of the year, I was like, what is wrong here? There's something wrong. There's something missing. And I kept thinking about that. And then when we started to discuss influence, I was like, holy shit. We're recording this. Oops, sorry. But I was like, oh my God, they have no sense of influence. They have no, and then, I started to read a bunch of stuff and look at stuff and, and unpack this and talk to them a little bit. And because they were just angry this year. And I think one of the biggest, and when you take a group of people, especially kids who are very young, right, and very, I don't know if immature is the right word, but not developed cognitively, and you put them kind of here and you don't allow them to make any decisions, which we've never seen before, right? We don't allow them to make any decisions. Everybody's making decisions for them, especially in a larger world, right? Everybody's making decisions for their parents and so forth, and they're like contained. And I kept wondering, how is that impacting them? And this year, being an English teacher and teaching rhetoric and argument, it was fascinating to see them not even able to take a position on something simple. Like they would say things like, well, I don't know. Can I say that? Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. Is that okay? And well, I don't know what I think. And there was such hesitancy. And then when we would talk about what, like, our conversations changed this year, like so many things changed. And I, of course, because it's only 1 year, I can't say, oh, it was because of COVID, or, oh, it was definitely this, I know it was this one group of students because we've all struggled with them, but it showed me how incredibly important it is for students, for young people, to have opportunities to see where their influence can occur.
That's interesting though, because it's interesting that you bring up you you use COVID as a lens to kind of look at that through, because and they can't make their decisions, and you said that their parents, their decisions their parents can't make too, and it's almost like it's like that whole situation of lockdown, work from home, all that stuff. It's almost like we all lost a little bit of agency during that time. That we didn't get, we lost control over things that we used to have control over. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, all those things that you said, I mean, I noticed those things, in my students too. I mean, I didn't attribute it to that, but I really think that idea is interesting. I just attribute it more to, they got a taste of being home half the time, and now, they have to come back, and, they were a bit rebellious against it, and I'm hopeful that that's going to be better next year. But it took longer. Like, I felt like last year my kids they were able to get to that space that you talked about with, that good classroom space. I felt like my students during the 2020-2021 school year, I felt like they were able to get there a lot quicker than these kids were this year. These kids struggled a little bit more getting there.
100%. Because and I think for me, like when we started to unpack, I had so many light bulb moments when I was looking at Jen's write-ups, the 4 I's, with influence, and it started to make me think about, did we, as a school, as institutions, and I know that some schools do this better than others, but, allow for areas for students to have these opportunities to assert themselves, to assert influence, and, to be creative, to problem solve. And when you take that away from students, what does that do to them cognitively, right? And how does that set them back? Because I wonder, we had the same thing here, like kids were rebelling at the beginning of the year, right? Those stupid TikTok videos. And I wonder, was it rebellion really, or was it just them asserting their power, right? Because we've been so powerless. So again, I go back to then Jen's, write-ups about, powerful and powerless. And if you've felt powerless, people can only feel powerless for so long until there's like a revolt. And and because it was across the country, those stupid TikTok videos were across the country, and it was, we talked to teachers across the country, they're like, oh my God, this was the worst year ever, because it the kids were feral at the beginning of the year, even though they hadn't been out of school, but they were out of practice as school, quote unquote, used to be, and then to come back into it and probably wanting something different or needing something different. I don't know. And I don't think I should only speak for myself. I was not ready. I did not know how to prepare for this year. And so I know that I'm already, I started thinking about next year as soon as Jen put these 4 I's in front of us. Because if I'm thinking about the civic, and I think it's so important in creativity, because I think before I worked with Harvard, I was more here, and I didn't understand how creativity was such an important part to flexibly thinking and adapting, and how creativity challenges and scaffolding creativity and scaffolding influence and scaffolding, how to think about, your role in the world, I think is critical in teaching. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, well, okay, so Andrea, so that really gets to, and our inquiry groups and, and the meetings that we've had and, talking about just kind of academically all this stuff. And I mean, I know you do. I mean, I'm listening to you right now. I mean, these things, I understand these things academically and I'm totally with you on that. And I make space for those things in my classroom. But I mean, I think for you and I, and this is maybe a little bit different from some of our other colleagues, that are, that are, have different contexts, but how do we do this? And this was really kind of for me, been the question all along.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. We're AP high school teachers.
yeah.
We have this rigorous content and deep content that we are responsible for, getting across to these students. And I know that, and we're really fortunate, that, I mean, we're not scrutinized over, our test scores and things like that, and our kids tend to do pretty well on their tests. But how do we make that a priority? And, and so, you're at one high school in our school district and I'm in another. And, how do we make that a priority? Because I think you just hit the nail on the head. Creativity lends itself to flexible thinking, which that does carry out into the world. Whereas, some of the, specific concepts that I talk about in my class with respect to environmental science, I mean, yeah, that's good. And I hope people know that and understand how the environment works and, ecology and, all that stuff. And that's great. I hope people understand that. But, being flexible thinkers is what's going to serve them in life more. And how do you make space for that stuff in your classroom?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my biggest challenges. Like, I want to rip apart the curriculum this year to try and figure that out. And like, I felt like I was doing really well with, like, you know, um, oh, what's it called? Visible thinking and thinking routines and so forth like that. And then, but now to add another layer on, because for years I have dreamed about an AP classroom, an AP language and composition classroom that takes on real world problems. And like with a business or with something like for years I have dreamed that, but I don't know how to put that into place. And so there's some things that I have seen in the C4 that I can do in more bite-sized manners and start to dabble with stuff, because I fully believe that kids came back this year and they were bored. And I know my kids were bored. And part of it was, I think, my own problem, because I felt, and I know better than to do this, but I focused on content more because I didn't feel good. And so
It's easy
so
to that, isn't it?
yes.
Mm.
And so that was what I could do. But I know that when kids are bored, when you're slogging them through content and it's not fun and it's not creative and there's not real thinking going on, right? Real problem solving going on, they're not engaged. And I think a lot of it for me this year is I didn't have the capacity to be that engaging and be what they needed. And so to think about, like, how can I change things for next year that allow for these opportunities? Like, I think like no, wait, which one is it? Where is it? Like, just to allow for opportunities to think in ways that they might not have thought about. Like, for instance, when Jen gave us the language around, like, what is just or what is unjust. Mm-hmm. Like, I was looking, I'll be careful what I say here, but because we are recording. But like, I was looking for ways to, in the wake of lit review hell. And I don't know if you've heard anything about the literature reviews and so forth in the district. But and parents' roles being bigger and questioning, CRT and blah, blah, blah. I was looking for ways to have engaging conversations with students that spun them in different directions where they would start to think about things in unique ways. And when I would overlay the question, you know, what is just about this?
Mm-hmm.
Or what is unjust? Like you would see their heads go, and, you know, and it could be about something simple, but then I would throw that question in and their heads would just start to take off, right? Their little brains would go, "Arr," and then they would have like these in-depth conversations to the place that when I turned them loose at the end of the year and they were doing these big research projects individually, they were writing, you know, they were looking at their own work going, or their own research and going, is this just? Is this unjust? And asking those questions to themselves. And, you know, is this sustainable? That was another great question that I'm sure you use all the time in AP Environmental, but I'd never thought to use that in English and what we do and the problems that we discuss. But it's so pertinent because if something, you know, this may be a fix right now, but if this is not sustainable under these conditions, then why are we doing it? And so to get them to think about that kind of stuff, I think is really fascinating. And again, it spun the kids in all different kind of in-depth directions, but to just use some of those questions like that to overlay into the content to get them to start to think in new ways, I think is really interesting.
Can you say more about, you know, just like the creative thinking? Can you say more about the scaffolding, like how you kind of see that playing out in your classroom?
Well, I don't know, because this is something that I have bugged Jen and Kat about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mark Walter is probably another person that I've got to bug, and because Mark does that one class,
Yeah,
that one
Explore, yeah,
super, what is it, Excite, or what's it called?
Explore, yeah,
Explore, yeah. And but like Jen has been saying, you know, you have to scaffold that creativity, right? You do small creativity challenges, and so forth. But like I've got some notes, like you know, we're a language class, and like creativity challenges are great, but how can I take the idea of creativity challenges and make them pertinent to our class? Like how can I change like a creativity challenge? And I was thinking, you know, I've been doing some reading and I was thinking like next year, one thing that I might do is like to create fake rhetorical situations, fake situations where they need to talk to one another, but make them more accessible. Like stuff that, you know, teenagers are going to be involved with. You know, so and so says this at the lunch table, and then this is what you hear, and blah 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 blah. You know, and okay, how do you respond and why? Or you know, but you know, and Jen has said to me and that, you know, you do have to scaffold that creativity. You do have to make, you know, it has to be a low threshold where everybody can, you know, kind of like those, you know, making thinking visible stuff where it's easily accessible to everybody. It's low stakes in order to build competence and confidence. Because if they don't feel competent in it, they're not going to engage.
Sure, yeah.
And they're going
like
to do that
seeking
suck back
wonder
thing.
and color symbol image and routines like that. Yeah. Do you use a lot of those, or do you kind of do your own stuff?
No, I use a lot of thinking routines. Again, I have not used as many this year, my own fault, that I normally would do. And I think that's again part of the problem is because I was doing a more traditional curriculum or delivery this year than I have in the past. So I was probably only using like one thinking routine a week.
Yeah.
And normally it was almost like with
Day
every
other day.
something. Yeah. So I don't know how to scaffold the creativity, but I know that it has to be scaffolded in order for them, because like anything new, like this year, like we did I do pointless where they don't do grades, where they don't get points in class. And boy, that was rough for them. They were like, what? But they wouldn't push back on it,
Right.
but they would complain. So it was just interesting.
Hmm.
So it's just, yeah. I don't know.
So you feel like then moving forward that just the kind of, I mean, the C4 ideas that we talked about. So you see that as, or at least it's your goal right now to continue to make that kind of a central point in what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I can't unknow it.
Oh yeah,
And
well, I like that. I like that a lot.
you know,
Yeah,
and
I like that a lot, Andrea. I really do. You
yeah,
can't.
yeah, I can't unknow that we need it. And to think of where the world is right now, civically, like it's a hot mess. And the United States is a hot mess. And to make more civic, community members who think about themselves as to think about themselves civically and part of a bigger whole and part of a community. And we know from being coaches and so forth, and that when people feel a part of a bigger whole, that's what gives you community, right? That's what unifies people and brings people together in a safe way, where you may not agree on this down here, but if we can all agree on this, that then not agreeing on this is okay, and we can work through this because we're all working toward, we have something that unifies us,
Mhm. Yeah.
those common assumptions, that common purpose, and and to move people in that direction, to have those realizations, to have something bigger than themselves that they can, set the rules for and set the grounds for and decide when it needs to change, and so forth like that. I think is key. And I know a little bit of how to do it, but I don't know how to do it, if that makes sense. I know what worked before COVID, but I don't know what works after COVID yet.
Yeah, but I think if that's important to you, I think they know that. I think they pick up on that. I really do. They know that that's. I mean, everything that you're saying, I echo all that. I mean, I've had the same struggles this year and have not, and that's funny that you say too that you just, you know, when you feel a little off, you just revert back to chugging through the content, and the whole time you're doing it, that that's not what you should be doing. Um,
Yeah.
I no, I totally get that. I want to go back to like what you said about I can't unknow that. Here's the other. Okay, so I had a timer just to make sure we weren't going too far over. Um, so the first thing I said was the $1 million question for us as high school AP teachers was kind of melding these two ideas together. And then the second $1 million question is, you feel this way and I feel this way. And, you mentioned Mark Alter, another high school teacher. I know he feels this way. Um, I know that like Rachel Dobney feels this way. I know, and I know that you've talked to a lot of your colleagues and things like that. And a lot of people that we've worked with have gone on to become administrators and, like Bill and, and Matt and, people like that. But it just, I don't know. Is this hard to do?
Yeah, I think so, because and I think it's the same thing that we expect from the kids. Like the kids want formulaic learning. And when we say, no, we want you to think, right? We're not going to give you a formula to learn this with. We're not going to tell you the hoops if you jump through these exact hoops, then you get this, because that creates compliance, right?
Right.
That just creates a bunch of people who are compliant and not thinkers.
Do you feel
And
a lot of our teaching colleagues are that way also? They just want compliance. They want to be like, okay, this is what my job is. I'm supposed to do this, and this is what I'm going to do, and that's what I'm going to do.
I can only speak for myself this year. And when I had health problems and I did not have the capacity to go at teaching like I could, especially during second quarter, I know that that's the only thing I could do, was to stay with the content and
Sure.
do very content driven stuff, and just the stuff that like AP classroom and stuff like that I didn't have to do all this creating with.
Right.
and thinking with, because I just couldn't do it. And and so I perhaps it's, with teachers, we don't know what we don't know. And it is harder because there's no path created for this. And it's not like do 1 + 1 and it will equal 2. We have to make a lot of decisions, and we have to be really responsive with the kids and know exactly, okay, when do I, you know, do this? When do I do this? Like,
We have to be creative.
right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that requires a lot and that requires a lot of focus. It requires a lot. Yeah, you can't on days when even on the good days that are really fun, I'm tired at the end of the day from
Yeah.
that
And
thinking.
because we're creating something bigger than just kids who do content. We're trying to create communities that learn together and grow together. And and to to put to create the conditions that create communities of learning, I think is very hard work. And it is work. Because I think you as a teacher, you can't be out in front because you have to let the kids be out in front.
You got to step back. Yeah.
And you've got it because you're a coach, right? And
Yep.
you're not a teacher, but you're a coach that coaches learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think and and when you want to give kids the ability to be creative and think about their own influence and imagine and be connected, we have to get out of their way, and we have to put them first and content second. And because I think when we do that, the content comes so much easier because they can do all those big thinking moves.
I
If that
just
makes
feel like I feel like so many people that and and I was probably this way, but I feel like so many people they just I don't know if they don't believe the kids can do that, or I think that's what it is actually, that they think that they have to I don't want to say spoon feed, but they have to make everything accessible, like if I didn't hit this little topic. I mean, I just know that like teachers that I've worked with on, not even, just like the making thinking visible ideas, that's just I mean, they're like, well, I want to try that, but I have to really get through these three concepts. And it's like, you're not getting it. And I don't know how to, I don't know how to help them get it. I don't, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they're right and I'm wrong, but I don't know how to help them get it. It's a tough, it's a tough thing.
it's a lot of layers.
It's a lot of layers. Yeah. It's a lot of layers. And maybe just the fact that they've been exposed to it and they're thinking about it, maybe that will influence how they just interact with their kids. Maybe they'll just say, what makes you say that? And if that's a win, if people will just do that. But yeah, it's I mean, all the issues that you pointed out, just culturally, that we're dealing with right now. It's like we have this little chance, this little opportunity to foster inclusiveness and and the ability to listen in people. And it's like we have this really short window, and I don't know. I'm with you, Andrew. I feel the pressure. I feel like that's what I should be doing. That's what I feel like that's what I should be doing.
Well, will you do, I'm going to ask you the same question. Will you take some of these ideas into next year?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'll continue to try to get better at it, and until I stop doing this. Because it's I, as you said, you can't, I can't unknow what I know. And that really, this is what should be happening in here is just a community of learners. And for me, they just happen to be learning, environmental science as the backdrop. For you, it's, and then you have your context, and I can't unknow it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, well, thanks, Eric, for the conversation.